Never in our history have we gotten to a point where we can outsource critical thinking, emotional capability, everything that actually makes us human.
Where, if any place at all, does the human fit in this model?
So we can predict with a 96% level of accuracy a person's level of having burnout over 3 weeks without asking us a single question. Like literally a couple of months ago, I started realizing I couldn't even do the basicest of things I could do before without it. This stuff that you're creating is actually causing so much harm in people. But unfortunately, if the thing that you're doing doesn't work, because functionally if you believe that the thing that you're creating works, then you're going to design a system to keep people on that platform for as long as possible, because engagement equals help, right?
Welcome back to the Potential Podcast. Today, my guest is Prof. Llewellyn. Prof. Llewellyn has researched and issued over 100 papers on positive psychology. He knows every study, yet his own life kept showing him that perhaps studies don't always mimic real life. And that's what happened to him. He had an event that we talk about that really shattered and shook up his lens on positive psychology and how it's implemented in our lives. Since then, he spent years rebuilding the whole thing, his framework around how we can implement positive psychology from the ground up. And as of late, how AI impacts your well-being. Before you head into the show, please subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And now, I hope you enjoyed this fascinating conversation with Prof. Llewellyn. Llewellyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sean.
I am excited to speak with you. You are doing some fascinating work. And as I prepared for today, I realized I would have had to set aside a year's worth of time to read every single of one of your papers. I don't know how I was wondering how you make or write so many papers, but then I find out you wake up at 2 a.m. Anyways, welcome to the show. My first question is, many of us in life, we encounter people at unexpected times that really dramatically change the trajectory of what we thought our journey may have been. I thought we would start with Ruut Veenhoven and the impacts he had on your life.
Ruut. Oh my gosh. I'm actually getting goosebumps off just thinking about it. So Ruut Veenhoven was, I think, one of the three founding members around like what happiness studies was. You had Ed Diener working on the life satisfaction, hedonic stuff. You had Ruut Veenhoven speaking at more a sociological kind of like level. And then you basically had like Martin Seligman with his, whatever it is that he was doing. And I met Ruut Veenhoven when I was still doing my PhD at the Northwest University in South Africa. And my supervised psychologist and supervisor basically brought a whole bunch of these people down. And we were sharing, my PhD office was also their temporary office. And he would always come in and come sit there. And we just had all of these chats about like what happiness is. And my PhD was on happiness. And we had this amazing kind of like deep conversations around stuff. And then we kind of like lost connection a little bit. And then when I came to the Netherlands, he's of course Dutch. We started meeting quite regularly, maybe like once a month, to have a little bit of a coffee and a little bit of a chat. And he really changed my thinking around stuff. I was going through this massive burnout around 5-6 years ago, where I really just thought like, I know nothing, I'm stupid, like I can't even take information in. And he really, in our weekly conversations, he really helped me to rediscover like where my happiness lies, and helped me to figure out my own story. So not only an amazing scholar and a thought leader kind of like in his own right, but also just this absolutely humble individual that always make time, even for someone as stupid and useless and whatever as me at the time. So he was really one of the 3 or 4 people in my life that I really felt like had this absolutely massive contribution and helped me to get to where I am basically today.
Those are some big things that he helped you with. I'm curious, you say this stupid guy, you've said that a couple times. What was he doing, or what do people do like him who, and I quote you, changed my way of thinking and my own story. What was he specifically doing that allowed you to make this seismic amount of enduring change, it sounds like?
So I remember that the one conversation very clearly. So while I was going through this burnout, I remember I had this massive breakdown. I sat on my couch. I had this like blanket over my head for like 2 weeks. Like literally, I could not get up. I could not even look at my phone. It was too much information. And then he texted me and like, "Oh, we're on for coffee." And I said, "No, not today. Don't really have capacity." He said, "No, just come to Utrecht. Let's have a chat and etc." And then again, right, his approach towards happiness is sociological, right? So looking at the global kind of like aspect and how all of these different factors kind of like fit into each other. And then when we sat down and we had a conversation, I said to him, like, the weirdest thing for me is that none of these well-being models and things are working. I'm sitting with a therapist and she's telling me, for example, to go out in nature. Now, conceptually, I know connection to nature means higher levels of meaning, means high levels of well-being, right? The relationship is very clear and it's very strong in the literature. But for me, when I go out, and that's the model, right? When I go outside, right, it makes me anxious. It actually has a negative effect on my well-being. Why? Because I'm very OCD, kind of like in a way. Everything needs to be super neat and very clean. So I associate being outside with being dirty, and that makes me anxious. And then when I started looking at all of these different models of well-being, these top-down kind of like approaches, I found that, man, none of these things actually spoke to me. None of the models, none of these instruments were aligned to my views of happiness. And then again, remember him, global thinker, said, well, what would it take for a person? What would it take for you to figure out what happiness means for you? What well-being means for you? I'm like, well, just ask me, right? Let's talk about it. Let's figure out like what's important for me, right? Because for you, connection to nature might be absolutely amazing. It might be a big driver. For me, it's something negative. In my own well-being model, which I'll maybe talk about because that's where the AI stuff started coming in later. In my own well-being model, the whole idea about social isolation was actually a strong predictor of my well-being. So being lonely is actually increasing my well-being. How? Why? Because functionally, I need that time alone in order to start ruminating and thinking about creative stuff and new things. And once I hit that point where I feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore, that's where I reach out to people and we start creating projects to do something absolutely amazing. And whilst we were having this conversation, he said, but isn't that what you're supposed to be doing? Figuring out this way in which to build very personalized, hyper-personalized kind of like well-being models centered around you. Because a psychologist can do that. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I mean, every psychologist does, right? You've got a mental model. I ask you some questions. The story comes in. I populate it into my little bubbles of my mental model of what well-being is, create a strategy, predicting where you could potentially go, and then figuring out what I can do to help you there, right? And then the whole idea was like, okay, once I figured that out, how can we scale it? And that's where the AI stuff came in. But yeah, that was one of the big things that he's done, big questions that he did. Asked to help me to get onto this kind of like road and help me to figure out my own story.
My own story. I mean, that's so powerful. I had a professor once would tell me is when you see someone, it gives them permission to be themselves. And Ruut makes me think of that.
Yeah. It was if I can just reflect on that statement, I think it's again, goosebumps. I think it's a very simplistic statement, right? But you only learn of yourself through other people. And that person gave me permission to be me for the first time. Raw, dumb. I have no idea what the hell's going on in life. I'm just doing whatever the hell I do to kind of like get through it. But at that moment, just allowing me to just be vulnerable and be me, allowing me to be myself, allowed me to discover these interesting things that I could explore.
Change your life, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So interesting how we have these moments in our life that really impact the trajectory of our lives. And as you're saying this, it just sounds like there was this seed waiting to bloom inside of you, and he just helped shine some light on it.
I think he's one of many people, right? You spoke about it before, this idea around me saying stupid, dumb, don't know what I'm doing, etc. Right? Because that's really how I felt. Because my work environment, or I allowed my work environment to make me feel that way. And it's I always think about, I'm not sure if you know, like the attachment styles, like the relational attachment styles. I always think about it also works with work, right? So I've got an anxious attachment style, and work is an avoidant. And then you constantly give, and it withdraws. And eventually you're in this very toxic kind of relationship. But fundamentally, that relationship with work made me feel that I am not capable of doing anything, despite the fact that my objective CV was 75 pages, right? But subjectively, I didn't feel like I knew anything. And I think the one thing I kind of realized was that the moment that you've identified your own story, the one thing that you really want to tell to the world, all of the other stuff starts to fall into place. And you start to learn the skills you need to in order to tell that story. You need to start to build the relationships with people. But it's all around the people around you that basically started giving me permission to be me.
Thank you for that story here. And it makes me think of how, preparing for today, I'm reading about a guy who, your words, CV 75 pages. In the intro, I touched on just how many published papers you have. You're really studying this happiness, but yet you start to critique, I guess. Does it work? Are we doing it properly? And there's a moment that I understand that you found yourself quite ill, and you're this guy deep into the research of happiness, but yet here you find yourself at a pivotal moment in your life.
That was kind of one of the most interesting things. I actually told Brian Dick many years ago, because we were working on this paper about the critiques of positive psychology, right? And it started with the idea that none of our interventions actually work. If you go look at it, and nothing.
Hold on, you got to say that again. Say that.
So almost every single intervention that we do does not work. And if you go look at the work of William Fleming, recently 2024, published a couple of papers. There was this massive RCT where they followed, I think, 42,000 people, where they did mental health stuff and physical health stuff. And none of these individual level interventions had any significant change in people's well-being, physical well-being and mental well-being over time. And the reason for that is because we're taking these one-size-fits-all approaches, right, top-down approaches, and apply them onto people and hope and pray that it will work for them. But functionally, like I've said, forcing me to go outside, walk in nature, has a negative effect on me, right? But practically, walking in nature, what is it, nature coaching, and all of these
forest
random
bathing
stuff, all of that stuff, it just makes me so freaking anxious, but yet all the research shows it does. Now imagine if you create interventions around these overarching holistic models of well-being, right? That is mental health continuum from Corey Keyes, emotional, psychological, and social well-being, where now we create this intervention around it, we force it onto you, you go and do it, you fail because none of these aspects are important for you. Not only does it not work, but it also makes you feel more negative. Why? Because even if an intervention that is based on science, I'm using the technical term here, if an intervention is based in science that can't help me, then I must be the one that's wrong. Then I am useless. So not only does the intervention not work, it has a negative effect on me over time.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it was in your papers I read that research is based on the average. You wrote the average person doesn't exist.
No. And it's literally that fact. If you go and look at every single last top-down, kind of paper out there, the idea is to say we're trying to fit people around a regression line, right? And a regression line, y equals mx plus c, is a straight line between thousands of little data points, meaning that we're trying to look at the average trajectory of a group of people going from one point to the other. And then we're looking at how we can fit that line so it can basically cover the most of them. But less than 1% of people are actually on that line, right? But you're designing an intervention for people that's on that regression line that goes like this. So if you're an outlier at the bottom and an outlier here, right, and we're applying this intervention onto you, it's not designed for you. So obviously it's not going to work. And that's why I think most of the stuff is basically failing, or was failing, was because of this specific fact. We're designing things we're designing interventions around statistical models that was not built around the person, but was built around the group. But that group, the average, doesn't exist. Therefore, the intervention can't work.
So you have this moment in time, this burnout inflection where your belief in paradigm changes. What did that experience teach you that research just could not teach you?
I think fundamentally it came down to that I'm the expert in my own life, and I'm the expert in my own well-being, not you, not a psychologist, not a textbook, not another professor. I know me a lot better than anybody else can know me, and no model can ever explain me 100%. So that was the big truth.
I'm sorry, my brain just bursted and I interrupted you, but do you think sometimes we can hide ourselves in the research?
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, you said that I know me better than any research. Do you think at times researchers can disassociate in a way from themselves and just hide in the research?
I think it's an interesting point, and that brings some ethical questions also into it. But I think functionally, because you are so involved in this one thing, right? And it doesn't matter research or practice or whatever, because you're so obsessed with it, it becomes your entire life to try and figure out this thing and to prove that this thing is right. And then we can't see outside of it, right? And that's, for example, why, if you look at, for example, social psychology and psychology in general, why we have this replication crisis, why we see all of these things about fraud. Well, because people are so obsessed trying to prove that one thing kind of like right, that they think is right, that they don't see other perspectives. So we tend to think, for example, that even critique of my own self, my own model, my own ideas, right, is something that is so bad. But functionally, if I can tell you, actually, Sean, your view of life is wrong, and here is A, B, and C, why, and it challenges you to think in a different way, even slightly, amazing. New research questions. But if you prove me wrong and say, oh, actually, you are wrong because A, B, C, D, and E, either way, we have advanced science. Because I came up with a suggestion, say why you were wrong, or why I see these things are not the case. You either prove me right, or you prove me wrong. But either way, we've facilitated our development in this field. But positive psychology, which is my field, is so, get the nice word, I want to say inbred in a way, right? That nothing that doesn't go with the norm is accepted, right? So if you don't prove that the 3 happiness or the 3 positive things exercise or the gratitude visit always works, right? Because that's what the science says, then you are wrong. And actually, just to give you a very practical example, we did a study with engineering students where we looked at just these 5 very popular positive psychology techniques: the gratitude visit, go write 250 words of someone that had an impact on you, go tell the story. 3 positive things, the 5 random acts of kindness, our own thing around the meaningful photos. I can't remember what the other one was. So we actually asked them to go and do it, one every single week, randomized control group. And do you know what? They actually came out more stressed, more anxious, and more depressed after those activities. Why? Because if you think, for example, engineering student, traditional, I'm just like exaggerating now, massive introvert, right? Don't necessarily studying numbers because I want to be away from actual people. Now I have to go make a new friend, do 5 random acts of kindness, do things that's outside of my paradigm. A positive intervention, just because it's framed positively, is not by nature positive. And not just doing it doesn't mean it's a neutral effect. right? It can have a negative effect because they did come back more stressed and anxious. So it's this very big thing in our minds where we get so obsessed with our stuff that we can't see anything outside of it. And that is why we're sitting with this intervention crisis, I think.
You know, when you told the story about Ruut, I'm pronouncing that incorrectly and I apologize.
That's right.
How do you say it?
Ruut.
Ruut. Okay. He gave you this gift to see yourself and believe in yourself. The way you're talking with such conviction, with such confidence, I appreciate that gift he gave because I can tell that this is like in the fiber of who you are. So I just want to make that observation that it's enjoyable to talk to someone who just like oozes out what they believe in.
Because I lived it, right?
Yeah.
Because functionally, I read all the single papers. I conducted all of these studies. I ran all of these interventions myself, on myself, right? And I read all these papers around it, fundamentally believing that the stuff works. But then when it came to myself, it didn't work. So either I was broken or the science was broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought for a very long time I was broken until I realized I was not broken. That I started to figure out what's going on in here. So I lived it. And that's why I feel like so strongly about this.
So you have this rebirth or this change of paradigm. How do we move forward now?
So this is now where stuff started becoming really interesting. So quit my job. I also had a near-death, I had a death experience. I got a flesh-eating bacteria, almost died. In hospital, and both these things, the burnout and all of this stuff is like culminating on that 29th of August, right? And I quit my job. I said, I don't want to do this stuff anymore, like academia shit.
Hey, Lou, this is my second interruption. I'm sorry. You made mention about a near-death experience as if you changed your mind on a menu item at dinner. So I'm going to pause you for a second there. The 29th, you're sitting there. Near-death experience. What's going on with in your mind that makes you start to change the way you're thinking?
So and there's so much irony in what happened on that specific day. So went out to Den Haag, got this flesh-eating bacteria. Went to the doctor the next day, didn't know what it was, sent me to hospital. Went to the hospital, emergency operation, right? Again, midst of burnout, I'm useless, I know nothing. Come out of the operation. Again, I've always never had operation before. I thought to myself, okay, they cut something out, it's fine, they stitch it up, you go home the next day. That's how I believe. I woke up, I said, okay, when can I go home? And the woman says, no, maybe like a couple of days. No, I've got a very important meeting tomorrow, so I need to go home. I said, no, the wound needs to like build itself up. I'm like, it's stitched closed, man. Anyway, the doctor comes up and says, no, like the wound is open and whatever. Okay, whatever. It was in my leg. So they take me up to in quarantine, and I looked down. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, but heavy medication. So I don't know. I don't feel pain. I see there's like a lot of blood at the bottom because it's right by my leg. I'm like, oh, they didn't clean me. I asked the nurses to come clean me up. Again, haven't seen this wound yet. About a couple of hours later, I looked down again and I said, oh, but there's way too much blood here. So they came, cleaned me up. They said, oh, okay, like they have to get the doctor because one of the veins they didn't close. And then when I looked down, I saw there's a 10 centimeter by 8 centimeter by 5 centimeter hole in my leg that's open.
A hole?
Right? A hole. They leave it open because it needs to build itself up, right? They don't stitch it open, closed.
Yeah.
Anyway, feel very woozy, fall asleep. Around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, but I'm so out of it. And I see like 5 people around me and they just say, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, look at my blood pressure. Like on the thing, it's like, I don't know, 60 over 40. Like I am totally, I've lost like 4 or 5 liters of blood. Like they had to wait for the surgeon to come out of surgery to come and like fix me. And at that moment, like it was just as if everything inside of me just like, I can't explain it. Just everything like crumbled into each other. And I was just, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. I hate
That's
this.
okay.
I hate this. I hate my life. I hate my work. I hate academia. Everything is shit. Everything is bullshit. And the irony out of all of this is that exactly at that moment, Professor Robert Emmons, the editor of the Journal of Happiness Studies, sends me a notification that a paper of mine was accepted without revisions. It never happened to me in my entire life. Right? I'm not kidding. I have it framed here. I'm not because of that, but because of another reason. And I was just sitting there, the freaking irony, right? And I decided I just need to quit. I can't do this anymore. So I took a year off. I tried multiple things. Like I didn't believe in psychology, didn't believe in academia. I thought like I was one of the major activists saying that everybody's talking bullshit all of the time and it's all just very fluffy stuff. Shoveled war shit, worked on a farm for a bit with my friend's farm, tried multiple different things, and then realized actually stuff that I kind of like do like is kind of like statistics, and I do the psychometrics. So I will create my little own instrument on well-being because like I realized that nobody can tell my well-being story as good as me. And then I created my little instrument, got hundreds of people to complete it, and I couldn't get quantitative. I couldn't get that model to fit. And then I thought like, we asked a whole bunch of qualitative questions here. Like what's important for you? What are your demands? What's important for your well-being? And I sat there and I started coding it manually. And I started realizing, there's so many things about people's well-being that we didn't know. For example, people from Japan, pet ownership was like a massive thing for them. Not an antecedent, a component of their well-being, right? And when I started coding this stuff, I'm like, oh, wow, there's so much stuff that we don't know. Is there a way for me to figure out how to model, how to predict, how to extract a well-being model from qualitative data? And how can I quantitatively model that? And then I started getting heavy into machine learning. And then I'd get it heavy into kind of training models and started fine-tuning Llama 3.2 at that stage to help me to kind of like predict and extract this from interviews. And that's kind of like how the AI stuff kind of like developed. It all came down from this fact where I started realizing that all of this stuff was kind of like crap. And then as I started going through this stuff, I started having to solve consistent kind of like problems in things. And AI was the only thing that that was able to kind of like help me to solve these very complex kind of like problems. Not AI as in Gen AI, I mean like machine learning, predictive models, those types of things. But yeah, that was kind of like my long story short. And after all of this stuff kind of like came together, I got one massive project with a psychometrics project to develop a psychometric test for people. And they were building a system and to kind of like use the psychometrics to make certain predictions about people to personalize content. And that's where I started realizing, actually, it's a whole bunch of engineers doing this stuff, but they have no idea what they're doing. And that's when I started realizing, actually, this stuff that you're creating is actually causing so much harm in people because functionally, if you believe that the thing that you're creating, so let's say it's a well-being intervention, works, then you're going to design a system to keep people on that platform for as long as possible because engagement equals help, right? But unfortunately, if the thing that you're doing doesn't work, remember the example of the engineering students, and I create a whole system to keep those engineering students on that platform, right? Not only am I not helping them, but I'm causing harm. And that's kind of like where this whole AI governance stuff and agency stuff and etc. kind of came about.
I want to go into this work you're doing now with AI. I just want to close a loop on that moment in the hospital bed when you're like, I don't like this, I want to change. And I ask because many of our listeners have had a moment, maybe not a hole in your leg like you, but a moment where they realize that the trajectory that they've been on isn't what they want to do anymore. And they have this inflection point. It might not be shoveling shit like you were doing, but it's like, I got to do something different. How did you pull yourself out of that way of thinking, like, I'm stupid, I'm useless in that moment in time? How did you pull it out? Not what the research says you should do. What did you do? And then B, what are you doing to not fall in those same patterns as you create something new?
Okay, so there's two answers to that question. But I'll be honest. So the first part was that I read Will Smith's book, his autobiography, and I used to be a very big Will Smith fan. And the second last chapter of his book, he said he did something 14 times that gave him some clarity. And I thought, if Will Smith can do this, then I can do this. And it was this ayahuasca thing. So I went, a friend of mine was doing research actually on it at Maastricht University. And because I was Googling it and trying to figure it out, and I saw, she was busy with it. So I drove down to her and I said, like, listen, can you get me into one of these trials that you guys are running around this, right? But I said, like, if there's any airy-fairy BS, I don't want to be involved in it. So she showed me the science. She showed me kind of like their shots of their little neurons and whatever. And then she got me into this trial. And it was this one kind of like thing for, I think we were there for like 5 hours or so, like under supervision with psychologists and the researchers and etc. And there was this one moment where, like, I felt, and it's I can't explain it to you, but the one sentence that came out of my mind was, there's beauty in the space between. And it's something that sticks with me. Like chaos, and then, or like structured issues, whatever, then there's chaos because you have no idea what's going on. And then once you figured it out, it's structured again. But in this moment where everything is falling apart, that is the moment where there's so much beauty. That's the moment where you can actually redefine yourself. And that was, I think, the first thing that I was realizing, okay, maybe I should just appreciate the fact that everything is falling apart and I have no idea what's going on. And I'm afraid of death and I'm afraid of whatever. That was the first. The second part around this was, once I was kind of started to embrace this, I started to have conversations with people around what's important for them. And one friend of mine, she doing her PhD on vulnerability, and she had this question that she asked me once, like, how would you define success? I said, what's success for you? And I was like, I publish 60 papers, if I make $1 million, if I do this and this and this and this, I had this whole list. Oh man, that's really amazing. Cool. Out of politeness, I was like, oh, what's success for you? And she's like, if I can go to my 11 o'clock yoga class. And I was like, my first reaction is like, what? How stupid must that be? Right? If that's how you define success in your life, going to 11 o'clock yoga class. But the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. Like, this person has enough resources. She can take on clients that she wants. She can do what she wants, when she wants, how she wants, for as long as she wants. She can do what's important for her. She has no restrictions. So that simple thing about going to my 11 o'clock yoga class became such a second profound moment for me. So, okay, well, maybe I should redefine what success means for me. In the past, it was metrics, it was outputs, it was trying to do all of this stuff that actually just made me feel dumber the more I did it. Because remember, again, you say about the publications and things, remember, out of the 100 odd publications that's published, there was 500, 600 submitted, right? And you have 600 that's rejected on top of that. So it makes you feel like shit. And then I started, but maybe I should focus on other things that's important. And then once I started focusing on these smaller little things, the weirdest stuff started happening. The right opportunity, and I know I'm not very airy-fairy in that sense, but I got invited to go do a keynote in, I don't know, in Australia, for example, to go talk about this stuff. And then another one in Italy. Then I was being involved in these other projects. So the moment that I changed my mindset around what success means for me, and that I should embrace the chaos, the right opportunities happened at the right time for me. And I can't explain it. I can't. But it just really felt to me that once I embraced the chaos and didn't have any expectations, the right stuff started happening.
Embrace the chaos. I recently was having a conversation with a bunch of business owners, and this was kind of the topic is, do we ever have things figured out? Do we ever have everything under control? Or do we just have to accept that the word wasn't chaos, but essentially embrace the chaos? So thank you for that verbiage. Today, what is success to you?
Oh man, like I think if I could just work with my friends, that's the thing. Like, that is kind of like the most amazingest thing. We have massive projects, right? From a financial perspective, massively successful. But none of this stuff kind of like matters because the only thing that's important for me is if I can work with my friend Leon, if I can work with Ian, if I can work with Leonie, can work with whoever, Brian. I just want to be able to spend time and do meaningful stuff with the things and the people that are important for me. I think that is kind of like the overarching kind of thing. And the other thing for me is that because I have my own story now, I also say like I'll never write another academic paper in my life. Hate it, it's bullshit, nobody. And I think I've been more productive in the past 2 years than I've ever been like collectively, right? But I realized I do like writing and testing ideas with people. So that's success for me. Not the papers, not the stuff, but the fact that I'm better now at articulating ideas and concepts and things that I never was able to kind of like do before because it was so pressed to get another publication out, another thing, just for the sake of getting it out because my performance agreement said I had to. So that is, I think, my success. Working with my friends and putting my ideas on paper.
Do you feel like you're enough now?
Interesting question. I have to think about that. I don't think I'm not enough, but I think my view on enough has changed. Many years ago, when I was just finished my PhD, or something, I can't remember. We had this professor at the university I was working at, University of South Africa, name is Frans Silja. And we started speaking about like all of my accolades at that stage, because I was very accolade driven. Got my PhD in 18 months, youngest editor of a journal, youngest president of a psychological society, youngest this, youngest that, whatever. No one cared. We had cared. Then he asked me, it's like, oh, so when you get so you got the PhD, you got the stuff, you got a psychologist, you feel good, right? I'm like, no, because I would always drive it next and next and next thing. But when will that hole be filled? Like, hole? Did all this stuff? Like, why are you chasing these things? Who are you doing it for? Because you're clearly not doing it for you. Never thought about that. And he made me realize that I had this big hole in myself wanting to be accepted, and I associated being smart and being all of this stuff with like being with being liked. And the more stuff I got, the more stuff I put into this hole, but I'm not realizing that this hole is basically a pit with nothing at the bottom. It just keeps going down. So, not like that. I think where I'm at now is that I'm good enough for where I am at, but the driver has changed. The driver now is not for me to try and fill a hole, but the driver now for me is like creating stuff for other people so other people can flourish. Creating systems, teaching people, mentoring people, building things. Like those are the things that I find so absolutely meaningful. I'm not good at it. I find so meaningful. And those are the things that I want to do. I want to help and support other people because if you are better than me at my stuff, holy crap, I've done my job and absolutely amazing. I think that's kind of like where I'm at now. The driver has changed. Not trying to fill a hole anymore, but I really want to be a better version of me so that I can be a better version for other people, so they can be better versions of themselves.
Hi, it's Sean. I know I'm breaking into the conversation just for a moment. There's good reason. If you're here, it means you care about living with more purpose, more meaning, and deeper connection. And that's exactly what the You Potential podcast is all about. When you hit that subscribe button, conversations like this, the ones that challenge you to think differently and open to new possibilities, keep showing up to you every week. And when you share this episode with someone you care, you're not just passing along a podcast. You're giving them a chance to reflect, to grow, and maybe even to reimagine what a good life can look like for them. So please take a second, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's spread the conversations that truly matter. Now back to the show. That sounds like wisdom from a lot of life experience. Thank you for sharing that. I did notice you slipped in. You said, I want to be good. I'm not that good. A little bit dig on yourself. You're building some great things, and you answered that so well. And I know there's a lot of people who have this point where your analogy is so good. You're not filling a hole anymore. You're building meaningful things. And it seems like you've been able to wrestle your own way through this arrival fallacy concept of like, once I get there, it'll be so good. Mm-hmm. Now it's enjoying the journey.
I like this. What use this example? We've got this in South Africa. We've got this massive race of 100 and something kilometers called the Comrades Marathon, and it's very strenuous. And I always thought to myself, you get two types of people, right? You get that person that wakes up every morning at 5 o'clock that absolutely hates it, that has to go and train, they have to eat right, they have to do this stuff because they know that it's important because they have to run that marathon, they have to get that medal. And they do it and they train and they hate it and they run the race and they hate it and they get that medal and they feel, oh my God, I've got the medal. I'm absolutely amazing. Other type of person is motivated by the process. Wakes up every morning at 5, loves the training, loves the stuff, loves everything around it, runs the race, gets the medal. Oh, okay. What's next? Motivated by outcomes and process. And I think for me, I realized that I'm a process person. So the whole will always be there, I think, right? But I realize it's not the whole that's important for me anymore. It's realizing that there gets a point where I need to get to do the stuff that I actually like. So for example, and I just have to say this, just to kind of close off this point, is that every single time when you speak to an older person, from a kid up to where you are now, probably, they say, you have to find a job where you wake up every morning and you're so excited to go there, right? You feel like energized to do that. Every time a person said that, it was bullshit. I thought so because I loved my work. I loved my colleagues. I loved the stuff that I did back then, but I wasn't excited to go to work, right? I wasn't excited to, I don't know, whatever. It's nice to see my colleagues and do things, but I wasn't like energized by it. But now I am. When I spoke about like I woke up at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning because I put my alarm 5 minutes, 10 minutes earlier sometimes because I just really can't wait to wake up to start working on the stuff we're doing. And I know it sounds so weird and esoteric in a way, but it's literally like I can't wait to wake up in the morning and start working on our stuff because it just energizes me so absolutely much. And it does happen. And I want to put that for whoever's listening to that to say that it is there. We just have to find that vehicle for you. Well, it can happen for me. It can happen for anybody.
I love it. I love your enthusiasm towards that. Okay, so AI, this is what part of the things you love doing, I assume, waking up at 2 a.m. As I think about this conversation, we've talked about well-being, how the average person doesn't exist. The models and frameworks that are the top down haven't worked. In fact, the engineering students, they've created the adverse effects. What are you thinking about now on this bottom up approach to well-being utilizing AI?
Oh my gosh. So Brian and I read this paper on like this bottom up science of well-being. And we actually got a bunch of the world's top people in well-being around the table, like last year, Carol Riff, Michael Steger, Todd Kastan, like really like literally the world's experts on well-being around the table.
4 of them have been on the podcast, those that you just said. So that's sweet.
Oh, nice. Well, shout out to them.
Yeah.
So I got them all around the table and said, listen, Fred Bryant, that is a person you should get onto this podcast.
Who's that?
Fred Bryant. He's this
Saver.
statistician. Yeah, Savoring. Yeah.
Yeah, Saver.
Absolutely most incredible guy.
So if he's listening, I'm trying to get you on.
I will send an email. Incredible person. methodologically, not content wise. I mean, he's excellent there, but I mean, like, as a methods person, extraordinary. And I'll say why in a moment. So we got all of these people around this table to try and figure out how do we actually build a bottom-up science or a precision science of well-being. How do we actually model it and etc. And of course, he came with all these absolutely amazing kind of like methods. And we sat down and I started to write the paper up, but we got all of this absolutely amazing kind of like inputs from these people. And then I thought to myself, wow, like how do we actually kind of like build this stuff, this ideographic approach, like from me? I mean, qualitatively, I can do it. I can listen to your story. I can write it down, Rogerian. I can make little notes. So I can say, here's the 10 themes. Give me feedback. Is this okay? Great. Can't do that to 20 people. Can't do that to 1 million people at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's why AI started playing a massive, massive role. And here's why it's simple. So when I told you before, none of the interventions work, I was partially lying. Because we know there are 4 types of interventions, right? You've got system interventions. So think organizational interventions. We you change the entire organizational system or you hire more people, right? That's the most effective and the only effective, constantly effective intervention, right? Problem is very expensive and no company is going to do that just because, right? So, but it's the most effective. On the other end of the spectrum, you have coaching, counseling, and therapy, which is the other thing that is effective, right? Because it's hyper-personalized. It's totally around you, figuring out what's important for you, setting your own goals, blah, blah, blah. Training doesn't work. Self-help doesn't work. Group development doesn't work. All of these other things don't work because it's functionally taking a one-size-fits-all model and applying it to a group of people that don't exist. Okay, so organizational restructuring doesn't work. So Michael Steger had this whole thing about regenerative positive psychology, blah, blah, blah. Excellent, amazing. Mwah, love you. Carol Riff, same thing. Problem is, not really going to work. Very expensive, takes collective energy to do so. 5 people around the table is not going to do. Look at climate change. But we can do the other thing. So how do we scale what a psychologist can do to you across 6 billion people? So that's where this started. So again, I'm a methods person, right? So the first thing in my mind was that how do you actually physically create a hyper-personalized model of well-being? How do we create an intervention that's actually going to target you? Where does it start? It starts with the diagnostic. Because I can only help you if I know what the problem is. So how do we diagnose things? So of course, you can have your little questionnaire and whatever. Top down is important for multiple things, not for creating interventions. So we started figuring out how to ask questions. How in an interview with an agent can we start mining data without asking you, are you burned out? Are you stressed? Are you happy? Are you whatever? But looking passively on how you're interacting with the system, but also during the conversation to do something. I'll give you an example. We built a system for a large consulting company a couple of years ago. They wanted to predict burnout without asking people questions. The reason is because in the Netherlands, a person can go off on burnout leave, sick leave for 2 years and get paid full salary for it. So it's a massive problem, but it's also one of the things that's easily exploited because nobody can tell you you're not burned out, right? So they want to be able to predict this. So we built a behavioral model. We looked at, for example, when people clocked in, when do they clock out? How many emails do they send? So we tried to look at behavioral consistency because if you're chaotic, you'll always be chaotic. If you're structured, you'll always be structured. So we created this behavioral model with around 20, 30,000 kind of like data points. And then we started looking at deviations over time. So we looked at, for example, maybe Sean clocks in a little bit earlier and clocks out a little bit later than usual. Okay, that's one deviation. It's not positive, it's not negative, it just is. Okay. Second change that we see in MS Teams with Vivo, you can do sentiment analysis. So your boss can get a memo once a week, what's the sentiment in his team. You can also do that at individual level. Oh, deviation. You see, your sentiment has changed a little bit. You used to be very neutral, and now you're a lot more negative in your communications. Okay, second data point. Still can't explain it, right? Third deviation. Oh, we see your billable hour. Oh, before I get to that, we see that you start answering emails a lot more rapidly, like a lot more, etc. Okay, also unusual. And then we start looking at billable hours. We start seeing that you have built 80 hours, 100 hours, but you're only working 40 hours. And that's significantly more than what was in the past. So now we can explain this and we can mine the data from the qualitative stuff to see high risk words, what you're talking about. So we can predict with a 96% level of accuracy a person's level of having burnout over 3 weeks without asking a single question.
Wow.
So that is, for example, we call that a digital twin. So we create these digital twins of these people. So that's a version of a diagnostic. If we bring this back to a psychologist, right? So let's say we want to build a hyper-personalized intervention strategy. How do we diagnose mental health problems, well-being, whatever, without asking you something directly? Okay. Having a voice conversation with an agent. We ask random questions. How are you doing? What's important for you? What are your challenges? What are the challenges you're experiencing, etc.? And we start building a profile of you, not just in terms of what you're saying, but we're vectorizing it. So we're looking at, we can assess personality, we can assess well-being, we can assess a whole bunch of stuff just by the conversation itself. But then we're also looking at how you're engaging with our systems. For example, maybe, I don't know, you do the structured activities a lot more versus the all over the place ones. Okay, maybe you're a little bit more structured. Maybe you find the individual stuff, one-on-one things very difficult, but you like to group things a lot more. Okay, that tells us you might have trouble in one-on-one kind of like environments. So we start building this well-being profile of you, both from the conversation, but also how you're interacting with the system. And we create, again, what we call this digital twin. And this digital twin is nothing more than a full diagnostic of you within a system. So a hypothesis of who you are. And then once we have that hypothesis, once we have that version of you, we can start running simulations to see what will work and what won't. So if we give you a happiness exercise, will it have an effect on you or will it not? So we can start running tens of thousands of simulations in the background to find the exact activity that can potentially help you with whatever problem it is that you have. But functionally, it started off with figuring out what this diagnostic was. Okay, cool. Got the diagnostic down. Easy to do. Nice technologies, building multi-agent orchestrated systems to help design these digital twins. Okay, great. Now, the next challenge we had was, okay, we need to also figure out how to actually get the right intervention to you, but also in a way that works for you. Just think, for example, a creative person and a highly structured person walks into a car dealership. If you want to sell a car to the highly creative, all over the place person by saying, oh, listen, 60 horsepower, so much kilometers, this is how much you're going to pay a month, dude, you're not going to sell that car to that person. And vice versa for the other person as well. But if you say to that creative person, sit in the car, just imagine what it's going to feel like driving down this road, right? No. Just close your eyes for a second. Right? The moment you can capitalize on that, you're going to sell that car a lot better. Same with the structured person, horsepower, whatever. So now we have to figure out how to do that, how to figure out who you are, so not only get the right content to you, but also to get it to you in a way that actually works for you. So again, we can break that down into smaller little pieces. Once we have those little pieces in place, we can create agents that can simulate and that can run these things. So that's kind of like the second part of how to build these bottom-up science of well-being. So we've got the science now, we've got the technology, and I think the only other challenge that we're currently experiencing now is about scalability. That's the new challenge that we kind of like. So how do we actually ensure that we can do this at a scale that is cost effective, easy to understand, and that does not actually negatively affect their well-being? What do I mean by that? Steger talks about regenerative positive psych, right? You can only be well within a system that is flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our stuff, hyper-personalized interventions, is the exact opposite, because we're utilizing technologies and things that's actually draining a lot more resources from the planet, right? So they're exactly in contrast with each other. You can't have the one, you can't have, you can't have one without the other. No, it's the opposite of that. You can only have the one.
Mm-hmm.
So now the point is like, how can we actually get these technologies in such a way that it does actually positively contribute to creating a regenerative system? And that way we can have a impact not only on the individual, but on the system itself. That's my new challenge.
I feel like you and Michael would have a fascinating conversation.
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Actually going to them in October. So remember I said Ruut Veenhoven was in our department?
Yeah.
So Mike was also there. That's also where I met him, for example. So we've built very good relationship with him and Brian and all of these people kind of like over the years because of my supervisor.
Mm-hmm. I see the impacts that AI can have on this bottom up as you're explaining it. Where, if any place at all, does the human fit in this model?
Excellent question. So our whole idea is around like any system that has to be built in order to protect and facilitate human agents, right? So very important is that we have to make sure that the person has autonomy in everything. So not just, because remember, if you go ask, I don't know, ChatGPT, give me 10 things that I can do to lose weight. I'm going to give you 10 things, but you're going to believe that that's the only 10 things that you can do, right? Which is not the case. It's some designer, engineer that had an idea of that's what the data is that we need in order to get to that point, right? But it's not your only options. But if you believe it is, that's the problem. So we have to make sure that we facilitate autonomy in this. And when it comes to our systems, for example, the human in the loop is the most important aspect. When we create a well-being model for you, it's not my well-being model, right? It's these are the things that we've identified. These are the things that we see. How do you see it? How do you interpret it? What does it mean to you? Is it right for you? So you take that information as the user, you look at it. Oh, actually, nature is not really the thing. I think you misunderstood it. It's actually more the fact that I actually just don't like being outside because I like being dirty. I actually like nature. I just don't want to be dirty. Okay. So we can, based on your feedback, we build the model. So we can only build a model with you. So think social construction. That's the word. So we're socially constructing this kind of like model with. So the human must always kind of like be as a central element to any of these systems, whether it is a well-being system or whether it's a system that you use to automate different processes. So for example, you see a lot of people are posting AI slop on LinkedIn, for example, right? But just as an example, it still goes out under your name. It's still on your LinkedIn profile, which means that even if you didn't read it, even if you didn't touch it, it's still you saying that into the world. So you have to take responsibility for the content that you put out there. So the same thing here, that you have to be 100% responsible and understand that if you can't explain how the system got to an output, if you can't trace the exact process it took to get to that 6 steps to well-being post that was generated on your LinkedIn profile, right? If you can't trace that, then you are fundamentally in the wrong. And you're fundamentally like negatively not only affecting your well-being, but affecting other people's in the process as well. So accountability, important. Human in the loop, super important.
I like the human in the loop. I like that. I've done a fair bit of coaching training under Robert Biswa-Diener, and a fundamental belief of him and Christian van Nuremberg. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come across Christian as well.
I know them.
Okay, is that I'm building capacity in the coaching client so that they can take the reins. As I, from my own observation, see AI utilization in AI, say it's the LinkedIn post or other utilizations in work, it's so readily available. I'm starting to see people become more reliant on it. And kind of the opposite of what Christian and Robert are talking about is we're building crutches as opposed to capacity building. I love this idea of facilitating positive psychology from top or bottom up. I'm just wondering how we can think about not building crutches when it's so readily available. I just pop on chat. I don't even have to think anymore sometimes.
Very interesting. So I in this paper of ours, we call it the AI ERA framework about human agency.
Sorry, I just want to say something. That's what I was getting at is human agency, because I know you're big on human agency.
But that's kind of like that's the everything's around that, right? But the thing that you're talking about is that whether a system is designed for what I'm going to say now or not, or whether you use a system for this is irrelevant. The point is that you need to remember that any system is going to be on the one end trying to supplement or augment your abilities, right? Or on the other end, replace it. There's another, I can't remember it's a bit late in the evening for me now, so I can't remember, but replace it, right?
Yeah.
So functionally, if you think, for example, a calculator, when you were in grade 1, 2, or 3, you could easily do a quick mathematics, right? 10 plus 12, 7 times 7, whatever. Then a calculator is provided for you. So now you cannot do basic mathematics anymore, which is fine because it's only one skill, but you can have more capacity to do more complex stuff, right? Right. GPS, another example. Used to be able to read a map. Now you can't get to the drugstore without the GPS, which is also fine because, it creates more capacity to more complex things. All of those things were just specific tools, right? Replacing a very specific task. Never in our history have we gotten to a point where we can outsource critical thinking, emotional capability, everything that actually makes us human. And me as well, literally a couple of months ago, I started realizing I couldn't even do the basicest of things I could do before without it. And I was like, holy crap, even me being so conscious of this stuff fell into this trap. So functionally, I think the point is that you have to start building things in terms of your own use of these systems to ensure that you are using it to support ideas that you have or to test ideas, but not asking it for confirmation, right? You have to take these things as hypotheses to be tested rather than suggestions to be incorporated. And the reason why this is so important is that you're an expert in money, right? So I presume I know nothing about it, but I presume you know stuff about investment and capital gains and compound interest and all of those things, right? So you go and you open a newspaper and you see a journalist talking about all of these things that you're an expert in. And you see they make fundamental issues about, they don't even understand what they're talking about. You laugh. Oh, what an idiot. You turn the page and now you read the next section by the same journalist talking about well-being. And you're accepting 100% what that thing is saying, right? But fundamentally, if I'm an expert in well-being and I read that, probably also make 20,000 different mistakes. But because I don't know the content, I just believe it. And I see this in practice. The reason why this is important is because if you don't understand what you're doing, if you don't have some level of capability in that thing already, right, you don't know if what you're doing is right or wrong. I want to give one example of one of the projects we were working on, just to make this very practical. People are building a system. They're not psychologists. They're not whatever. They have no idea what they're talking about. And they're just doing everything ChatGPT, creating personalized models, creating this, creating that, getting all of this fancy stuff. No idea what they're doing there, right? I take a look at it and I'm like, holy shit, this cannot go out. We cannot build stuff around this because fundamentally you're breaking 20 different thousand laws here, not only, but fundamentally the stuff doesn't even make sense. But they believe it so strongly because the AI assistant told it, because it's outside of their domain. So where I'm talking about that supplementing, augmenting my capabilities, I'm very good at statistics. I'm very good at machine learning, right? So I'm utilizing it to help me to do things that I couldn't do before a lot better. But I can still have the capability to check if the stuff is right or wrong, if it's making mistakes. Where in in financial planning or like on my finances, I've got a couple of agents that does my bookkeeping for me. I trust that thing 100%. And then the other day when I had my conversation with my accountant, I gave him my stuff very fancy. I'm like, you're very proud of me. I did everything. And he started going through the Excel sheets and he's like, what the hell did you do here? And I'm like, no, our agents built it fundamentally wrong, but it looked right to me and I was very proud of it. So the point I'm trying to make is that we have to realize that these things should support us So we have to use it in our specific domains to make us better at the things that we're already doing well and not outside of that domain. And the second part is that systematically reducing the support on reliance on it. For example, what I'm doing is that once a week, I've created a list of all the stuff that I used to be able to do without AI, right? And then I started seeing one of those 20 things am I more reliant on than usual. And then from those things, I take 2 or 3 things and I deliberately try to take the harder path at least once a week. To try and keep my brain stimulated to keep that level intact. Otherwise, I will just become dumber. Cognitive decline.
It seems like it's up to us to not become, to use your words, dumber. And the proof will be in the pudding. People will create work in like you talked about, that will have holes everywhere. We think it's good. I guess major classic Dunner-Kruger effects are going to be everywhere. I think,
but it's also you believe it. Right? That's the other thing. Like the Dunning-Kruger effect, because that's the problem that I see with initial clients, is that they fundamentally believe so strongly that these things what they have is right, that they can't deviate from it. They can't see, actually, you are wrong. There's no way that a job demand can have a super positive effect on my life satisfaction over time. But they believed it because that's what AI told them. And then they can't deviate from it. Okay, I will shut up now.
No, I really enjoy this. I know it's late there. I have a question that's kind of our worlds colliding here. And it spawns off what you just said there, is like almost the merging of these two industries, or these two fields that very much interest me, well-being and the way we think about money. For a long time, I looked at like models from Tal Ben-Shahar, who's been on the podcast, Spire, PERMA, and my orientation or my environment, my contextual way of thinking always evolved around money. And I often thought, like, how do we hit these levels of well-being if our financial house is on fire, if I'm in scarcity mindset? There's a lot of research around scarcity, whether it's poverty or health. They have such adverse effects on the way we see ourselves. I know you've done recent work, a paper, I can't remember the title of it, but it was on the PERMA plus 4, the additional elements that to me seem more context and not like, if you have positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, accomplishment, you're going to be happy. Now we're looking at, well, you got to have health. You have to have financial capabilities. So that's what I'm going to specifically talk about right now. In a way, is that PERMA plus 4 a way of top down meets bottom up? In a way, no,
it's still a top down. It's still a top down approach, right?
Still top down.
Because you're still functionally I'm still functionally dictating to you. Well-being is A, B, C, D, and E.
Right. As opposed to asking.
Yeah. But for example, financial well-being is a very important component with regards to well-being. In our top-down model, it is a big component, right? And we also look at objective metrics, not just asking. We look at inflation rates and all these other metrics that informs it. Okay, very important. But that model doesn't dictate it. It doesn't ask you. So, and remember, an instrument, a model can only measure what's on those questions. It cannot infer things. So when we talk about bottom up, think about it like having an interview with someone to try and understand it from your perspective, like that Rogerian kind of like approach where you're the center of the universe and I'm only here to be a guide to help you to figure stuff out. That is what this bottom-up science of well-being is. It's trying to understand things from your perspective, building a quantitatively valid model that we can do inferences and predictions and stuff kind of like about, but that you're in control of your words, your ideas, your concepts, which might not be anything close to mine, as an example.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You can't capture my worldview from an assessment.
No. It's impossible. And that's literally why we have so much issues with psychometrics, right? And we always have to ensure that there's invariance between groups and genders and ethnicities and cultures and whatever, because we want to make sure that every single item on that line, everybody understands it the same way. But functionally, again, they don't, because nobody understands that question the same way. No one. And that's why when I ask you, what's important for you in your life, right? What are the things that makes you happy, it makes you tick? I can't tell you if that's right or wrong. My assessment can tell you if that's right or wrong, because if it's not on there, it doesn't fit. I can't, and when we start building this little model, say, oh, actually something very simplistic like loneliness is actually an important factor for me. It's something that I need in order to actually function, because I'm a massive introvert, right? It's important for a well-being assessment that measures depression, anxiety, and stress, the DAS, will measure that 100%. It's like, oh, shoot, here we go. That's stress, that's anxiety, that's loneliness, that's whatever. Not positive for me. You know.
Lou, you are insightful, energetic, and I could tell you love what you're doing here. I know you've been up for like 85 hours. So that was an exaggeration. I'll land this conversational plane. As we come to an ending here, with some parting comments or disclosing, not what you can't disclose, but sharing what really excites you in the domain of what we've been talking about here, that you think the audience would be satisfied in closing with.
I think everybody is scared of AI taking our jobs, and AI is going to do this, and AI is going to do that, and etc. I think we're, for the first time in our lives, in the history of the world, anything is possible. Literally anything. And I think the most important thing that I want to kind of like leave with, say that two things that you need to remember. One is that AI can never replace creativity. So creative thinking, innovation, absolutely important to stimulate that. But on the second end, remember in the beginning I said people confuse the idea around AI fluency. I can use the tool with AI competence. I know actually what I'm doing. The only way in which we become competent is by playing and by trying things, by experimenting. You're not going to hurt anybody. You're not going to break things. You're not going to burn down the world. Go try things, play around, see what works, right? I think if we take both of these things into consideration, the world literally is your oyster. Creativity and play. Births amazing things.
I'm not just saying this, but I got goosebumps, and I feel like I almost had my own version of a Ruut moment. So thank you. I needed that statement. Yeah. My final question that I've asked everyone is borrowed a little bit from Ed Diener's approach of what is happiness when he said build a larger front porch. But let's imagine now you're at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are. I know you've kind of been at that spot, but let's say that it's coming to an end. You're sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that brings you complete peace, ease, and a feeling of content. You decide to write a letter on what you learned was a key to living a meaningful life. What would be the message?
Oh, it's difficult. Maybe I just come down to that thing about saying, just do the stuff you love, the people that you love. And I think for me, that's the only two things that's been important over the past couple of years. And that's the thing that's created opportunities for me, people that, I'm not good with people, but I think that if I'm doing stuff with the people that I care for the most, that understands me, that understands my moods, that I understand their moods, we can really do absolutely incredible kind of like things. So I think fundamentally doing things that you love with people that you love.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you, your time, your insights. Thank you for sharing this conversation with my audience. For people listening, where do they find your incredibly fascinating work?
They can just go to our website or to Google Scholar, just like llewellynvanzyl.com or psychanalytics.com is our business. But functionally, all our papers are kind of like listed and stuff there. I'm not very big on social media, but follow me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. We'll include those sites in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for tuning in this week. What a conversation. Llewellyn didn't learn a lot of the things he talked about from the research. Well, of course, it informed his ways of thinking. A lot of what he learned and come to realize when his own frame or lens of the world changed was what he experienced in himself, not in the research papers. Of course, the papers are important, but what he started to really talk about in this conversation is that well-being isn't only found from the papers. And when he started talking about AI, it really resonated with me because AI, it's coming everywhere we look. And that part in the conversation where he talked about how he's starting to forget how to think in different areas of his life because he uses AI so much. We all can relate to that. And that's a scary thought. At least it's scary for me. Seneca said over 2,000 years ago, read all you want, but digest it. Otherwise, it sits in your head and never becomes your thinking. Why I bring this up is because I don't want to outsource AI for my thinking. I want my thinking and my critical way to be curious and analyze things to be deeply my own. Seneca was right 2,000 years ago, and I hope that stays true for the next 2,000 years. So this week, my question is, where am I relying too much on AI to think for me? And where is it just doing my typing? Because I hope I'm focusing more on just the typing and not my thinking. Until next week, have yourself a great one. If you've been enjoying these conversations, please subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast.